Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. Some interesting things to talk about this week. The first of which is a slightly confusing blog post, I think, on the Microsoft Teams blog announcing call record insights for Microsoft Teams. Now, if you read the headline of that, that sounds like Microsoft are announcing either a new feature or a new product or something like that. And this is none of those things. I initially almost missed this because I thought it was going into the product set, is going to be a part of the IT Pro toolset around reporting for call records, and was of therefore limited value to developers. Turns out that's not the case at all. What this is a kind of guidance for developers in a way, or sample code maybe, or an offering if you are a developer and you want to put together what they are calling call record insights, which is essentially you using call records data. So if that sounds a bit confusing, I'll try and break it down further. So call records, you've always been able to, well, not always, for a few years now, you've been able to subscribe to and get details around call records information in Teams calls. They happen on wrap up. You do that by subscribing to a change notification feed and then processing the data. When you get it, you get the data in JSON format, and it contains lots of information you can then do reporting on. What this blog post is doing is walking you through what you need to do with that data, a sample architecture and a sample solution essentially for doing that. So it's not a packaged thing that you can turn on and get. It's not even a thing you pay for. I'll show you because it is kind of confusing. So they've got some screenshots, but the screenshots are from Azure Data Explorer, and they're an example of how the transformed call records look. Okay, now if you've subscribed to these call records already, this will be no new information to you. This is just the data that comes out of call records. And then here they've got a visualization, which is an example dashboard from, I think it's Custo dashboards in Azure Data Explorer, showing what you could do with the data. And then obviously you can put it into Power BI as well. So this is the architecture we're talking about. This is the Graph API here, the subscription the Azure function you'd use to go and create the subscription, and then processing it via an event hub, blah, 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 off you go. And then they've got a link, which I'm going to follow now so you can see it, to GitHub. And in GitHub, this is where you've got, I've gone to a funny place, but really where you want to go to is the root. Here you go. This is where it really tells you what it is. A turnkey application template for retrieving, parsing, flattening, and storing Teams call records retrieved via Graph API. So slightly confusing, but this, if you don't already have a solution for looking at call records in Microsoft Teams and you don't fancy paying a partner to do this for you, you could do this yourself. However, this is not a turn it on and off you go. This is you need to find a developer or someone who knows what they're doing. You need to then go through this application. You need to configure it, set it up, get going with it. So I think it's of interest to developers rather than being of interest to service owners. But I think it's slightly confusing to call that something. I wouldn't call that a thing. I would say here is a template, here is some sample code, here is a solution and an architecture for viewing call records, rather than calling it something like call record insights, because that makes it sound like something it kind of isn't. Anyway, it's not up. Naming is not up to me. So that's the first thing I want to say about. So if you might come across that, if you're about to build a solution for accessing call records in Microsoft Teams, maybe go and take a look at this, because this will probably give you a massive head start. Okay, let's talk about something else. The Microsoft Teams application store, the App Store that you publish apps to, the verification process for, or the validation process for that, where you publish your apps for review, that has been slightly updated because the guidance that developers get around avoiding common failure reasons or reasons for failure has just been updated to include AI content. So this is probably a blog post I'll do in the week, but just kind of for your high level, the things like not indicating that apps are generating content that's been AI generated. So apps need to make it really clear that the content they're generating is from AI, if that's true. Users have to have a way to report objectionable accessible content. And then the owner, the author, I guess, needs to modify the AI generated content to provide a safe workplace environment for users. I don't actually know how they would test for that particularly. I guess maybe they're going to do some kind of prompt manipulation and see if they can make your app do things that would not be a safe workplace environment. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they'll ask publishers to attest that they are doing moderation of that stuff. I think that's really hard to do personally. And I think it gets a bit tricky if developers have to parse and screen kind of the input that goes into their apps, because traditionally, like, developers would kind of stay hands off from getting involved in looking too much at the data that goes through their apps that might be sort of sensitive or related to the organization it's being installed into. And organizations, I don't think, will want their data going back to the developer just to be moderated. So I think there's some nuance there in how all that stuff kind of gets worked out. But it's interesting to know that the team that validate this stuff and validate apps as they go into the App Store are now very actively looking at this and failing apps that are using AI content or AI generated content in a poor, what they perceive to be a poor way. Okay, and then finally and quickly, there's a new update to Visual Studio, the Fat Client Visual Studio IDE. For Copilot. This combines the Copilot and Copilot chat experiences together into one. It's going to be included by default in the latest version of Visual Studio, which is 17.10. There's a blog post about it, which I should quickly show you. There's a video you can go and watch, but we're not going to do now. You know all about what Copilot is. Yeah, this is the important stuff I want to tell you. If you're using Visual Studio 17.10, Copilot will be included right out of the box. You can also do it later, but you don't need to download and install the individual extensions for Copilot Chat and the GitHub Copilot completions that you do at the moment. So that's nice. That brings it kind of in parity with Visual Studio Code, I think, which is a very seamless experience for using Copilot. So this is good to see. Nothing changes here about the requirement to have a subscription to use GitHub Copilot. This doesn't mean it's magically included in Visual Studio. It just means that, like, if you have the GitHub, if you sign into GitHub and you have the license to use Copilot, it'll seamlessly start working in Visual Studio without you needing to go and download anything. So that's good. So that's all that's about. So that'll be of use, I'm sure, to lots of developers who are, it's just a kind of a messy setup process to have to install all these extensions. So this is bringing that stuff together and baking it into Visual Studio. Obviously, just took a little while to get into the release cycle of the main product. All right, that's everything for this week. Trying to keep it kind of short. Busy week for the rest of the week, I think. And again, I'll try and get that blog post out about the AI generated content in apps, because it's kind of interesting and it's a reference for everyone. Other than that, have a great week, whatever it is you're doing, and I will speak to you again next time.